July in California at almost 10 a.m. A couple weeks ago, we took apart the idea of the Dungeons and Dragons rogue. Because the Dungeons and Dragons thief, rogue, really isn't a rogue. I like the term dungeon scout or expert. And there's also many permutations of the rogue. So I thought, while we're walking home from the store, we would babble about some of the other classes that don't really make sense to me. And this is all just thought experiments. You don't have to agree, you don't have to disagree. You can completely ignore anything I said. This is just me looking through the lens of the 40 some odd years I've been playing this hobby, and looking through the lens of Shadow Dark and the other OSR type games, and what I would do to change them if I were to write another fantasy OSR. Not that the world needs another fantasy OSR, which means I probably will write one. So let's start with the casters. Now, wizards, despite how many times they have been run through the grinder and split up, and oh, I'm a necromancer, I'm a conjurer, and put back together, wizards are pretty much done, right? We are happy with the wizards. Whether it's a D4 hit points or a D6 hit points, we get that at the beginning of their careers, they kind of suck, though with cantrips, not as much. But towards the end of the career, the wizard's the primary damage dealer. I hit him with my sword twice for 8 points of damage. I fireball for, 97 points of damage. Yeah, so, but the wizard has some competition in the sorcerer and the warlock. So, what the fuck is the warlock? I mean, is it a cleric? Is it a magic user? Is it a sorcerer? Is it its own thing? Now, you'd think it's some type of version of a cleric. I pray to this force. This force gives me powers. And in exchange for these powers, I occasionally have to do something for this force. It's like having a district manager. Once a month, my patron shows up and tells me to, do something. And often the things it tells me to do make no sense to me, but it doesn't matter. I have to do it if I want to keep my warlock powers. How's that different from the cleric? So are they a type of cleric? Or are they a type of wizard? Because, they have very specific abilities and incantations and stuff like that. And summoning does seem to be a very wizardy thing. So, I don't know. Are they a wizard? Or are they something else? Don't know. To me, they feel more cleric-y or sorcerer, which is the nuts and bolts of this conversation, the sorcerer class, which has never really made sense to me. First, I don't know why they added it, other than I guess they wanted spontaneous casters. But when you think about it from a perspective of, magic versus science versus art, wizards are the scientists of magic. They're very, they take magic apart, they put it together, they spend years researching it and studying it and applying it and copying and pasting it and testing hypotheses. They're the scientists, which is why wizards should have metamagic instead of sorcerers. Sorcerers are the artists of magic. They can kind of just dip their hands into the wellspring of magic, pull out. Occasionally they get what they wanted. Summon magic missiles. And occasionally they don't get what they wanted. I summoned a camel. Yeah. So, if I were to remake the sorcerer, I would definitely lean heavily on that chaotic aspect. The wild magic sorcerer seems to be the closest to what I think a sorcerer would be, the artist of magic. The idea that sometimes I get what I want, and sometimes chaos happens. Now, the first thing I would shift is I would increase the percentage chance of things going wrong at low levels, Because right now you roll a d20 and you only get a wild magic surge on a 1. And let's face it, the only real reason to play the sorcerer class is the wild magic surge. Otherwise, it's just a weaker spellcaster than a wizard. Alright. So I would start the wild magic surge a much higher level, and as they got a higher level, I would decrease the possibilities of the wild magic surge happening. And you'd have to roll any time you cast a spell. So that's one way I would do it. So you have your loadout of spells: Charm Person, Magic Missile, Shield. You reach into your art supplies, right? Let's see. And then there's a chance that you get what you want, Charm Person, and then there's a chance you don't get what you want, and I summon a camel. So everything would be built around that table being very high chance at the start and decreasing as you level. So that'd be one way to do it. The other way I would do it is I wouldn't give you spells at all. I would just give you access to the mainframe, access to the Shadowdark. And every time you reach into the Shadowdark, you're trying to get a specific response, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? So that would be the other way I would do the wild magic surge, the chaos. So we know somewhere in the pot is Charm Person. So I'm reaching in the pot, and my desired effect is Charm Person. And let's say there's a random table that I roll on for first level spells, second level spells, to see what I I want, right? And let's say it's 1 through 10, 8 is Charm Person. So I have 1 in 8 chance of getting the spell I want, and an 8 in 1 chance of getting something completely different. Might be beneficial, might not be beneficial. You don't know. It's a little bit more controlled than just random chaos, but it's still chaotic. And then what I'd maybe say is you get to add your, 1/3 your level, kind of like with the healing spells, to the roll. So at first level, second level, you're adding +1, Third, fourth, you're adding +2. Fifth, sixth, you're adding +3, etc., etc., etc. Stuff like that. All right, so I roll my d10 and I get a 6. Well, Charm Person is 8, but I'm first level, so I get a +1, which means that's 7. So instead of casting Charm Person, the DM could say I cast 6 or I could cast 7. And then we would look on the table to see what 6 is, and we would look on the table to see what 7 is. And so you could get the spell you wanted, the number that you rolled, or you could get the one above or one below. Or maybe just one above, or I don't know. It would be some systems so that you increase the chances of getting the spell you want as you increase in level. So at first level, if you're choosing from 10 spells, the chances of getting the Charm Person are minimal, but something's going to happen. Maybe you cast Shield, maybe you cast Light, maybe you summon a rabbit, maybe you set your friend on fire. You don't know, but if you're lucky, you get the spell you wanted. Meanwhile, like 5th, 6th, 8th level, you're definitely increasing the chances of getting that spell. That's another way I would do it. But basically, I would want the sorcerer to be heavily into magic is an art, and I don't always know what's going to happen. That's the main crux of my build. That's why I chose sorcerer, is I want that randomness. I don't have the wherewithal to be a scientist, but magic is cool, and I want to do cool stuff with magic. I want to paint pictures with magic. So that's how I would fix the sorcerer if I added a sorcerer class in fantasy, D20 fantasy. Focus on the chaos, focus on the art, focus on that idea. Now then, we could have, we don't really have sub-builds in Shadowdark, but all the other OGL games that do fantasy have sub-builds. The magic user can be an enchanter or a transmuter. The cleric can be a war cleric. The sorcerer can be dragonborn or whatever. So would we include that in our build? Now, Shadow Dark doesn't do anything like that. The closest thing I would say is, optional rules for like if a caster wants to focus on one thing and study that one thing, I might, increase the chances of that getting more powerful or more versatile or something, And same thing. So I don't know if Shadow Dark needs subclasses, because Shadow Dark is so simple, and Shadow Dark focuses more on the personality of the character. Like every fighter in Shadow Dark is pretty much the same, depending upon their talents. It's really just how you play that and what your focuses are and your background. So I don't know if I would add the bloodlines to sorcerer. If I wanted to add dragon blood or psionics, which would be like the only other two bloodlines I think would be appropriate for sorcerer right now. Maybe demonic, but not really, because that's warlock. I might make them subclasses, the dragon caster or whatever. I don't know. This is just speculating and spitballing and running off my mouth to have some ideas and keep my brain awake while I walk home. So what do you think? How would you fix a class that doesn't exist in your game, or add a class? How would you fix sorcerers?